Institut of Public Service INSP France. You are in same, yes, in same institution. Ah, okay. Dear panelists, it is great honor to welcome you all today's discussion. Your expertise and insight are important as we delve into the critical topics of reforms and innovation in the public sector. We are excited to have such a distinguished group of professionals, each bringing unique representative perspective that will enrich our conversation. Your participation today is crucial in helping us explore new ideas, challenge existing framework, and chart a path forward for more efficient, transparent, and innovative public administration. We are eager to hear your thoughts and learn from your experiences. Thank you for being here with us and for your commitment driving meaningful change. Let's have a productive and insightful session. We'll start with Qëndrim. The first question, Qëndrim, for you is how can we manage our public officials be improved to foster more innovation within the public sector?
Afternoon to everyone. It's not easy to be part of this panel with such experienced panelists. Explain what we are doing for reforming the civil service in Kosovo. First, let me introduce myself. Lule just mentioned. My name is Bytyqi. I'm the acting head of department for management of public officials with the Ministry of External Affairs. That is the main coordination institution in the area of human resources management, and together with my colleagues, most of them are here with us today, we are trying to reform the civil service in Kosovo. First, about the innovation, I consider innovation to be the essential element in ensuring that the government services are delivered to citizens, and also that the government will remain responsive and effective in responding to the emerging needs of citizens. I think that in order to have reform in public administration, we should start with the backbone of the public institutions, that is the civil service itself. And in order for civil service to be innovative, I think I have summarized the main three areas when we can improve. The first one is the talent development and capacity of civil service. This is one of the main elements that we need to improve in order to have more innovation. This has to be done through not only ad hoc trainings or trainings that are systematic and are being given the same to the civil servants, but also with mandatory and also continuous training, including e-learning platforms. Another area when we can improve in order to enhance innovation in civil service is the merit-based systems and initiatives. This means that we should create merit-based recruitment system, performance appraisal, and also to reward the initiatives of civil servants. The last part, when when I think that we should work in order to enhance the innovation in civil service is by creating collaborative working environments for civil service. This means that all civil servants from various departments, various institutions should work together. They should have the possibility to work in joint platforms by sharing ideas, sharing their experiences, and by promoting new ideas and new reforms. These are what I think are the three areas where we can improve. I think in the second part I can say more about what we are doing in this field.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Qëndrim. Ms. Céline, how is your directorate contributing to fostering innovation within France's public sector, and what lessons can be learned for other countries? For example, we can take now our country, Kosovo.
Thank you, Mrs. President. 2 years ago, INSP, the National Institute for Public Service, replaced the former National School of Administration, well known as ENA, at the Application School for Future Public Decision Makers. It's the French leading operator for the initial training and also continuing training of senior executives and state leaders. Since its inception, the school has trained 4 presidents of the French Republic on 5, 9 prime ministers and dozens of ministers. So in this context, of course, the research directorate is a new player in fact, its creation marks the institutional difference from the former ENA to the current INSP. Of course, it carries substantial responsibility due to significant missions, which were seen by Prime Minister itself, as the Institute is part of its services. So, when I arrived in this context 2 years ago, I had to assemble a teaching staff of researchers and public policy practitioners and to initiate research projects, to form partnership, of course, with university, public administration school, institutions, and moreover to incorporate research into the training program and create a doctoral course for interested students. So, this work primarily benefits to the students of the Institute, future senior civil servants. But additionally, we support public administrations that employ our graduates and contributing to the public good. In fact, in French we say general interest. So, because we have to teach how to search and effective research methodologies, but also produce actionable research to enhance public policies and governance in a changing world. So we had to look abroad to see what is in course abroad. And I'm a comparative law specialist. So to me, we have always much to learn from other countries, culture, experience, of course. And in the field of public administration, it's the same, it's a similar situation. Especially within our globalized society and considering the current ecological and digital transformation, we must determine how to manage these changes collectively. And I think that success will come only if we understand how these matters are perceived by the others, with a capital O, if I can say. Thus, INSP teams collaborate with numerous states, welcoming international students, creating teaching partnerships focused on public policy and governance. Specifically, the Research Directorate organized the first International Days event in March, dedicated to training into public administration in collaboration with the National School of Administration of Quebec. Another event is scheduled for next year. And 2 weeks ago, I attended the ECPA conference in Athens with 2 members of my staff. Next week I will host the Director of Research Directorate of the Italian National Scuola Nazionale dell'Amministrazione a Roma. In November I'm scheduled to visit Morocco and so on. So we're hosting also foreign researchers, lawyers from South Korea, sociologists from Brazil. We advance by engaging in exchange of course.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Edoardo, in your research, what innovation approach to public sector management has shown the most promise for addressing challenges like bureaucracy and inefficiency?
Well, thank you very much indeed for the kind invitation, for the opportunity of being here. Hope you can hear me. Before I pick one, if you don't mind, if I have these 2 minutes, as a comparativist of public administrative systems, I would like to just throw a couple of ideas on the trends, which is part and parcel of our across Europe, not long things, but just mention 2 points. And these are, of course, impressionistic, based on my experience, my ongoing research, and of course, different perspectives. But when I try to sum up in a 2-minute statement, trends in Europe and what we can learn, and of course, you are learning from the experiences of France and Kosova here. But I noticed 2 things. In terms of process of reforms, we went from radical reforms some 10 or 20 years ago to very incremental approaches to reform when compared just with our past, not with other countries. When we look at how comprehensive our reforms, so across the board, the public sector or just one area, we tend to see partial, piecemeal focus as opposed to comprehensive reforms. When we shift from process to contents, we see, or at least I see, 2 dominant areas: digital government and human resources management. These are the preoccupations of reforms, not necessarily in France or in Kosovo, but considering the kind of overview that together with colleagues we are working on to map reforms all over Europe and beyond, of course. And when we look at how context, the political, administrative, cultural context, is taken into consideration, 20 years ago it was not taken into consideration. There were some new ideas, the new public management, or the new public governance, the big ideas, big and bold, everyone has to apply them, and also some international organizations perform their role. Nowadays, and this is a great achievement, there's so much attention to context, so context sensitivity. So what we have nowadays, and I'm finishing, is reforms which in terms of dynamics of process are incremental and partial. In terms of contents, are focused on digital government that's driven by the impressive transformation out there, and by human resources. In terms of context, they are very sensitive. Problem for big innovations. Isn't it that we are restraining too much, limiting too much our focus, not that much courage in undertaking important reforms? For multiple reasons, we can discuss in later round of questions, but the point is, this makes it more difficult. It can have a lot of process thanks to this approach. It's context sensitive, you don't run the risk of making big mistakes, you don't run the risk of splashing too many resources for reforms that do not deliver results, and so on and so forth. But so cautious, so limited, so step by step, there is the risk that in the end we don't learn, we don't change, the citizens are not happy, and in that way they further self-reinforcing prophecies, they further reinforce the crisis of public services. So this is my main message, which makes it difficult to pick one or the other innovation as the winner, the next way forward. That was my main point. Sorry,
How has the new institution contributed to the reforming the public administration in France, and what successful practices we can show, especially to our country and our institutions?
Thank you very much. I think we have to be very cautious with this question because, as we saw this morning, the comparison is sometimes difficult. And in fact, in France, I think we are a little late about what I'm going to speak about is research departments. And so we learn a lot from other countries, like INSP, for example, in Canada. So it's quite a complex question. But I just want to add a few words about how innovation was prepared last year in the National Institute of Public Service, and is still implemented now by the creation of a new competency dedicated to research. And I think it's a big break in the history of this school. It's very interesting, but not always easy for political scientists like me to be since 2023 with my colleagues at the heart of the decision-making process on this reform, working with senior civil servants in its different stages. So, of course, formulation, decision, implementation. But the advantage is that precisely as political scientists, we have a knowledge about decision-making process which allows us better to understand what is at stake. For example, to me, the book Essence of Decision by Graham Allison, American politics, was still very useful to me. What was at stake here is the creation of a new research directorate, as Céline just said, which have to collaborate, but sometimes also to compete with other directorates inside the school, one devoted to initial training, and the other to professional internships in embassy, in European Union, of course, in administration. And of course, these departments have their own bureaucratic culture, this Allison model too. So the challenge for us was to demonstrate the value of creating a new specific research skill in the competency framework for civil servants. It was a real struggle. And I remember that I was in ECPA in Zagreb last year in Croatia when Céline called me and said, yes, we have competence. But it was a struggle, and we achieved this, for example, by underlying the need for studying public policy and administration with methodology, reflexivity, comparison between countries, and for a better dialogue between academics and civil servants, which is not always self-evident in France, even if some of our colleagues from the former National School of Administration, like Fabrice Lara, for example, tried to develop foundations for research before us. So together with my colleagues at the Research Directorate, and especially Professor Sébastien Cotte, we have proposed 3 steps in the research competency. First, raising awareness for the civil servants, raising awareness of research, bringing together senior civil servants and academics in workshops. Last year, for example, with Barbie Dobra, and on administrative reform in Europe. And we diffused a recent article written by Edoardo Ongaro about this subject to the students. Secondly, producing a research work on public policy or administration, kind but not exactly a policy paper, to develop their competence in analyzing public policy or public administration issues of their choice. They choose the subject. And thirdly, appropriating research with the possibility to develop a PhD inside the institute. And it's a big issue now for Céline. So some of these innovations have been taken up naturally. I remember, for example, an exercise on the creation of a unit for women victims of violence, for which we were asked by the Directorate of Training to find a researcher to present an international comparison of this question, in Spain, for example, or other countries, before the intervention of the responsible, the senior civil servant of this policy. I believe that we achieved this result because we were able to integrate ourselves into the institutional ecosystem, showing that for each skill of civil servants, for example, ethics and deontology, negotiation, innovation, all stages of public policy and so on, communication, a lot of academic works can be used, and it was not evident inside the institute. However, for some of these innovations, we encountered a lot of difficulties for the creation of a new competency, and also in the case of the policy paper, because the main difficulty was for us to find time devoted to the exercise. We know all here that you need time to make research, and we know also that civil servants don't have many. So, on this point, we found ourselves more in line with Allison Model 3, with the need to go higher within the institution to obtain this time for research, for civil servants in training. And it was very important for us, very important struggle. And I think this example is very interesting to think broadly about the legitimacy of competencies in all the frameworks for civil servants. What is the competency which is considered as legitimate and the legitimacy of each competence in this framework? Research for us. But to conclude, it's a huge satisfaction to see now young civil servants now in these weeks starting this type of research with us and academic colleagues, even during their internship, because now with the help of the directorate who's in charge in the Institute, and it will enable them to confront with research, which will be very useful in their professional career, and especially because a lot of them never made any research before. So I think it also prepares a lot of future cooperation between administration and academics. Thank you for your attention.
Qëndrim, the last for current reforms in our administration.
Yes, as you may already know, the Kosovo civil service, or even the public sector, is undergoing a lot of reforms, and we can say that we are working on transforming the whole public sector in order to ensure efficiency, transparency, but also citizen-centric service delivery. Here we can mention a lot of reforms, starting from the digitalization of public services through online platforms and one-stop shops like we have in Kosova and many other platforms, but also to the simplification and reduction of administrative burden in order for the citizens to have more efficient and more services digitalized and reducing the burden on them. But I will mainly focus on the reforms that we are doing in the management of human resources, as I also cover that part in my daily work. So in the modernization of human resources management, the first reform that we are doing is the legislative reform that you may know. Last year we have adopted two laws, the law on public officials and the law on salaries, that have changed the whole system of the civil service. With the law on salaries we have introduced unified systems for salaries in civil service, while with the law on public officials, we have worked in order to make the civil service more professional and also to encourage the application of candidates from outside the civil service. So from a closed civil service, we have gone to the open civil service when all candidates from all other institutions and also from the private sector can apply and be appointed in civil service. So this change, of course, that needs changes also in the technical capacities. That's why we are currently working on reforming the human resources management systems, where currently we have we have digitalized the process from the application to verification, online testings, and also the online appointment of the candidates. But still, we are working and we are aiming from March next year to make it even more transparent by also having the possibility of selecting selection committees in a transparent and online way through algorithms. In addition to human resources information system, as I mentioned before, I think that also performance management system has to be changed in order to allow for more innovation in civil service. That's why we are also reforming the performance management system of civil service from a technical performance appraisal system, where the supervisor will assess the performance of the employee. We are going to a 360 degrees performance appraisal, where your supervisors, the people under your supervision, and also the HR unit will be able to assess you. So from a top-down assessment, we have also included the down-up assessment and all the 360 degrees appraisal system. In order to have a good performance appraisal system, of course, for civil servants, you need also to have a reward for their performance. So the best ranked civil servants will get rewarded for their performance. In this way, with the law on salaries, we have foreseen a specific bonus for those civil servants who have performed the best during the year. In addition to this, one of the main reforms that we are working is the reform on professional developments of civil service, from a system where there were some technical trainings that civil servants were asked to participate. Now with the law we have made the obligation for mandatory trainings and also for continuous training for civil service. And we hope that we will make this in practice, make this happen in practice, together with the work that Lule are doing with KIPA, and also with the aim and with the work that is being done to transform KIPA in a national school for public administration. So when we gather all of these three elements together, I think that we will contribute to transparency, to efficiency of public administration, and also to give better services to citizens.
Thank you, Qëndrim. According to the School for Public Administration, and if we get all the examples from other countries and the countries that we have in agreement of cooperation, we saw that it is needed to the Institute to be transformed in school, because we will cover the whole public administration and different, we will have more, how to say, narrow system in order to lead reforms in one way. Because if you lead for many institutions, it will be harder for us. Now, we will, maybe later we will discuss for that. Céline, again for research, because to say the truth, in this, for research we still didn't develop this field. I want to know how the research is leading to reform in public administration. Especially maybe any example.
At the INSP, we have to stay at an operational level. So In France, the directive to transform is quite clear, I guess. It's a bit different for us at the research directorate because the meaning for scientists like us is a bit different. I mean, we are embedded within an administration, and also we hold our position as scientists. Our mission is to transform the administration we are part of by introducing a scientific and innovative culture into civil service. So in fact, we have to transmit our scientific culture both to our students and to public administration, despite operating in an ecosystem that in France, as Thomas said, until now wasn't adapted at all for this type of endeavor.
Thank you. Thank you. It's sometimes it's hard to have the panelists that they are professional in their public administration manuals. So we want to ask too many questions, but I will try to for Edoardo to cut some because we have more. What strategies should public sector leader adopt to have a success in reform in public administration?
I try to simplify a lot, of course, but I think 3 points public sector leaders could, across the board, so partly across different contexts into which our public administrations operate, seem to me to be a kind of key factors. One is a blocking factor, and this is to remove blame and risk shifting. Too many reforms come to be perceived as shifting the blame or shifting the risk, or both, administrative risk, of course, or both, towards those who should reform. Let's even start, at times it's finger pointing. The public sector doesn't work is the incipit before any reform. So that's not the most encouraging way. It's basically saying to people who work in the public sector, look, you're wrong, and now let's reform. So obviously this comes from public leaders for obvious opportunities, structures and incentives that they have. And so we all understand why this happens, but to me it's a big blocking factor. On the more positive side, so how to enable reforms more positively, I see many, but 2 levers or 2 dynamics. One is creating career opportunities for those in the public sector and public service. But of course we all know that money is scarce and will be even worse in the future. And of course, for a number of reasons, it's not the monetary top salaries you can have in other business sectors. So, what kind of career opportunity? It's enrichment in what people do. At least for part, because we have to be realistic, not everyone is motivated exclusively by the pursuit of the common interest. Not everyone working in the public sector and public services is motivated exclusively by the pursuit of the general interest or common good. But at least the enrichment of their opportunities, skills, and so on and so forth, which actually leads to the 3rd point, which is what both the speakers at both sides of me are working at. So the kind of competence and skills frameworks, but we all know that in itself developing certain skills can be a way of rewarding people if it's not money or it's not something else. But of course this has to be created, this possibility and these opportunities have to be created in creative ways, and of course this implies to differentiate between amongst staff, because not all staff will react or as chosen in the first instance to join the public service for this, let's say, more noble goals and objectives, so we have to be realistic on this. But for many people, at least many in my experience across a number of European countries, this can be very important.
Thank you. Thank you. Thomas, can you get any example how to encourage employees when you do the change in general in public administration, for example from your institution, because when you start to change the way of working, way of researching, way of, depends what you have against deeply your work.
Yes, sorry. I think it's also a question of not only of administration but of political will to reinforce this capacity of bureaucracy to create, to innovate and to recognize the work, because we have a lot of work about the rigidity, the bureaucracy of administration. Okay, and we can find all this, but you have many administration in which you can find a lot of experimentation, in fact, but there is the question to develop this experimentation and also to maintain it inside the administration, to develop the kind of experiment, capital experiment. And so in all fields, I think it's possible to develop these things that you have in our institute, for example, in the digital department. You have many innovations, but you have to valorize and to develop this kind of I think skills inside and outside the institute.
Okay, thank you. We have, as I said, too many questions, but we don't have enough time. I will leave the time for audience if they have a question.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Umberto Insolera. I'm a deaf person. I'm from Italy, and I'm the executive member of European Disability Forum. So about all this transformation and reform, it's not only Kosovo that wants to reform, like Europe would like even to reform and change what is. What is the drawback? For example, for accessibility or person with disability, we have like an average percentage which is about 10%, while the other percentage of person with disability in Europe or inside each country is lower compared to those countries who have real accessibility in their national legislation. Could you, yes, just because clear and accessible information are always a solution for people, for citizens in general. So transparency. So public administration can guarantee rights and freedom. But what kind of strategy would you think to implement for accessibility?
It's a question for
Maybe, yes, I can start with what we have done with for people with disabilities. First, according to the law, at least 10% of positions in every institution, at least 50, every institution that has employs public officials, for every 50 officials, one of them has to be from the category of people with disabilities. So there is an obligation to have this proportion in every institution that employs public officials. Legally, the obligation is there. What we have done in practice is, with a new regulation on admission to civil service, we have foreseen the possibility of institutions to open recruitment processes only for people with disabilities. Because you know that sometimes it may be hard to compete at the same group, at the same competition, with all high number of applications, high number of positions. So we have foreseen that the institutions, in order to achieve this one person with disabilities and 50 employees, to have the possibility to open recruitment processes only for that category. During the last years, we have had some competitions where we have recruited people with disabilities, but yes, I think the main issue, the main problem is still giving them the right tools to do their job, including the accessibilities to the institutions, but also tools to help them implement their job. So this is something that maybe we are lacking behind, and we should work in the future.
Thank you, Céline.
Okay, thank you. As I said, the INSP is a school of application. So the research directorate organized a few months ago a workshop for the students on this question of accessibility through the question of evaluation of public policy. It was one of our first workshops. We have created ateliers de recherche, as we say in French, research workshops for the students, which are a totally new initiative in the school and very unusual in France. We don't want to invite senior officials to be only witnesses of public administration, as it was done before, but we want to invite them as actors, and actors of the current transformation. And the question of accessibility, of course, is one of the most important in this way. So we don't ask them to share their experience, we ask them to discuss some scientific works that academics present first. And why did they commission this research? Was it relevant for their purpose, and so on? In fact, I don't know if I can say that, it's an apprenticeship by exemplifying.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes, Edoardo.
Just mentioning a couple of examples here, one of which I'm no expert at all, but for example, I think I can say that also other colleagues from UK universities, but the accessibility of web pages is quite powerful. I compare it with also other countries I will not mention here, and actually you find that they can be much more accessible. And also, for example, in our part of our job, which is publishing books, etc., we now have, of course, it's more work, so in a sense it's a cost, but it's important. We now have to follow certain rules. So, for example, every graph, diagram, whatever, has to be described verbally for the visually impaired. So there are things that are, I take this example of public service, higher education, because it's the one in which I work, but I think there are things that are going on. So in certain areas, it's really a matter of inventing new solutions, but in other areas, it's probably just a matter of implementing them more as rapidly as possible.
Yes, thank you, Edoardo. Anybody else, if you have any question? Yes? Just come see the microphone.
Hello, my name is Jonas Gitas. I'm a professor for the University of Thessaloniki in Greece. I would like to know maybe what is, I agree with talking what was said before, that not many countries, or many countries in Europe, have the same problem of reform and innovation in the public sector. One trend lately we face in different parts of Europe is the so-called PPPs, the public-public partnerships, which we find it very useful, and I'll explain what I mean. It's in those cases where public bodies or the government collaborates with other bodies for knowledge transfer and also to provide services to the government. These are called PPPs. Do you have something in mind when you talk similar, when you talk about reform and innovation in the public sector in this country? Thank you.
Any example maybe from your countries for PPPs, public-private collaboration? Okay, public and PPP. Okay, thank you.
Sure, we go just very briefly. It's not my specific area of research, but of course it's part of the. It comes with the package of the job I do to have. I think PPPs, and of course here I may lack the empirical evidence and specific recent experiences, but one of the lessons I learned from colleagues working doing the research like you on let's look especially for the moment public-private partnerships, then we can also develop the other side one step at a time. I think, well, in principle, looks like, on paper, looks like a great idea, but in practice, the risk of capture has been terrible in so many instances, or transfer of risk, transfer of, so I would say, and the problem is that, and here I conclude, but that's the point, is that of course the less the public coffers have money, and the more these become appealing to new decision makers who come 20 years later, not necessarily have studied the problems of 20 years ago. Of course, also fields change and so on and so forth. New technologies may again drive the public sector to engage into public-private partnerships, but the risk is repeating, in my view, that's a lesson I drew, repeating the same mistakes. So I think as a responsibility of both the academia and leaders in the public sector is to issue a warning. Not that it cannot be used, but that the risk, because it's so obvious, no? Some benefits are immediate and the problems will be for the next generation of taxpayers, basically. We need to issue a warning so that at least the debate gets framed in a better way and more thorough analysis gets done before governments venture into PPPs. That's a lesson at least I learned from colleagues much more knowledgeable than me in this specific area.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your very interesting presentations and thorough discussion. I would like actually to ask you two questions. One, it is how all of the esteemed speakers spoke about innovation and reform in your respective countries. My question is, how do you measure the success or not of public administration, of public sector reforms and innovation? Are there any specific metrics or frameworks that you use or you recommend for evaluating their impact? Because it is something different to speak about that these are the reforms, and totally different, I think, in order to measure as a feedback, in order to do the necessary changes. And the second question, it is the following. Over the years, or in the last 2 decades, I would say, we have seen a decline of trust of citizens in public administration. For me, this is a major challenge and reform to be addressed. Is this the case in your respective countries as well, and how do you recommend to address it? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If somebody from Panelists wants to answer. Yeah.
I will try to be incredibly practical here because your questions are so big and so important. But after reading, like all of us, many books, I continue to find chapter 5 of the book by Christopher Pollitt and the late Christopher Pollitt and Gert Buchert on results of reforms still very inspiring. They are critical. They exactly enucleate how we don't have measures, we don't have data, we don't have but with all those problems, they also frame different ways in which we can measure results, from the operational to the building of capacities to, and the final dimension is trust. Whether trust has gone up or down as a measure also of the impact of reforms. So probably that book really can still be a real linchpin, a real go-to intellectual tool to consider actually both of your fantastic and so important questions.
Thank you. Okay.
Just one thing on the two questions. According to about the first one, the evaluation is a major issue. For example, in the case I spoke about, we made evaluation of all our workshops by the students. And they are very smart students, so we have in time the interest and the limits of our perspective. So it's very interesting. It's just a little example, but I think it's very interesting because we have a progression on this workshop thanks to this evaluation, which can be very hard sometimes. And the second element, I just want to, it's a very difficult question because how you measure the connection between citizens and administration. We have a very big research that is coming around a sociologist who is called Vincent Dubois in France, but he will make a big research with comparative issue, 50 countries, about the relation of popular citizens with administration, with a lot of interviews. And I think it's a way to understand sometimes the criticism and to understand more precisely where they come from. And in front, of course, we have a lot of problems of this kind about sustainability, about fiscal policy with sustainability, about digitalization sometimes also, accessibility to digitalization. And I heard this morning your colleague, my colleague, police colleague from Kosovo say the risk of depersonalization. And I think it's very, because of course digitalization is a wonderful tool, but also maybe with some difficulties on this point.
Thank you, Thomas. Rinor, shkurt, s'kena
Okay, the final question.
Niet.
For the final question, thank you to all the panelists. I wanted to bring this a bit more in the local context, like 20 or even 10 years ago, like being a civil servant or working for a public administration in Kosovo was one of the top jobs. And this is not the case anymore because the private sector has been strengthened in the meanwhile, and it's been more attractive, for instance, for students like coming out from this faculty, let's say, for lawyers. So Professor Edoardo mentioned before that one of the incentives would be the enrichment of these people to join the public administration or the civil service in general. But I have a specific question for Qëndrim. Like, what is the government doing in this regard? Like, are there any plans how to make the public sector more attractive and to ensure that the best ones like are recruited and actually bring this innovation in the public sector? Thank you. Yes, it is true that the public sector is not attractive anymore as it was before, but I think this is not the case only for Kosovo. Last year in November I was in France in INSP, and we had a discussion about how to make civil service attractive for ITs, for example, because I think this is one of the main areas where civil service is not attractive anymore. So, but especially in our country, it's not only ITs, as you mentioned, it's also lawyers, it's also main of the professions. So what we are doing first, I think one of the reasons why the civil service is not attractive anymore is the comparison of salaries between the public and private sector. The private sector is paying much better most of the categories of people, most of the categories of persons that are graduating. So what we are doing, first, as I mentioned before, we are working on making the recruitment process merit-based by doing it more transparent, by having digitalized procedures on recruitment, and by ensuring that the best ranked candidates will be appointed to civil service. This is a challenge, of course. We have started working on that, but we know that this will be a challenge because of many problems that we face. what we are also doing when we see that maybe we cannot make the whole civil service attractive to all categories, we are also working on specific programs. One of them is the Young Cell program, the Young Cell Scheme programs, where we select a number of candidates, a number of young graduates, and we finance them to go and study in EU member states with the obligation of them to come and contribute for the public administration. This, we have done this for many years, and I think this has been proven to be one of the best programs in order to make the civil service attractive again, but unfortunately for a small number of people. So what we need to do in the future is first to work on the salary reforms more, to make the salaries of public service compared with those on the private sector, to enhance the development of civil servants, because for some professions like ITs, salary is not the main problem. Professional development is also something. You can offer to them specialized training programs for ITs when they can enhance their capacities. So this can also be important in order for them to be part of the civil service. And the last one, the most important, is transparency in recruitment and merit-based recruitment, that we are working, and we hope that by next year we will be much better in this aspect, having in mind all the reforms that we are doing in digitalizing the procedure and advancing the human resources management information system.
Thank you, Qëndrim. Thank you, Mr. Thomas, Ms. Céline, Edoardo, that you are sharing with us your experiences. You said that we have to do more to develop research in order to find the gaps. And from the gaps we will develop our reforms in public administration. How Qëndrim mentioned that we did some steps. We did digitalization of services for many citizens. Before we spent maybe 1-2 days to get many documents. Now for 2 minutes you can have in one click. So, but we are not so happy. We need to work more and to do more in order to have research and analysis in our institute and in our school. And for example, the Institute for Public Administration to develop curricula in order to cover all the institutions that they need to do reforms and innovation. We need to educate them in order to have in hand and to handle our responsibility for reforms and innovation in our public administration. And thank you again. Thank you, Panelists and the audiences. And I hope we'll have you again, because for us it's